Hello and welcome to NC Debrief. I am Gbenga, Aborowa. Africa has the second highest number of displaced persons in the world, according to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. The figure has recently been rising because of ongoing crises in the Central African Republic and Somalia, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi. The continent hosts about 37% of the world's 19.6 million refugees and 39.1 million internally displaced people, according to UNECA. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, recorded a total of 30 million Africans in need on the continent in 2018. This figure includes almost 7.5 million refugees, 630,000 asylum seekers, 1 million stateless persons, and around 500,000 returned refugees. But the largest group is still made up of internally displaced persons. Over 18 million Africans have had to leave their homes but are unable or unwilling to leave their country. Joining me on the debrief today to unpack all of this and discuss the inclusion of Africa's marginalized people is Kuewor. He is the co-founder of Refugee Integration Organization, an NGO which works to improve economic integration for refugees and migrants. My other guest, who will join us in the course of the show, is Bola Lawal, co-founder of ScholarX, a social impact platform that facilitates access to education for young people in Africa. Thank you very much for joining us on the debrief.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Ria, what are the causes of refugees and internally displaced persons in Africa? Why does Africa have such a disproportionate number of refugees compared to the rest of the world?
Well, I think because Africa is rife with war, internal conflicts within nations have forced the creation of refugees. That's the main cause of it. And there's natural disasters also that come to play in that area. But it's mostly for the purposes of war.
Crisis, war, insecurity, yes, and
absolutely,
natural disasters, like you said. Now, so what are some of the issues marginalized groups on the continent deal with, and what are their biggest needs and challenges?
I think some of the main issues that they deal with is being marginalized, the very nature of it. It makes them a rather forgotten group. It makes it very easy for decision makers to forget that they exist because a lot of the places that we keep these people, for instance, refugee camps and detention centers, are cut off from the rest of the world. And if you're not working in that space or involved in the news around that space, you very nearly don't hear about any of the dire straits that these people are going through. Unfortunately, this news is not coming out as it should. And so a large portion of the world is not aware of what's going on outside of reports from UNECA and outside of reports from the IOM and outside of reports from the UNHCR. It's very rare that people outside of this community know what's actually going on with displacement and statelessness and refugees in Africa.
Now, Uganda stands out in refugee hospitality as the country that hosts the largest number of refugees in Africa, with more than 1 million. What makes Uganda stand out in this aspect? And what other countries are receptive to refugees on the continent? We always say we're brothers keepers in Africa.
Right. I mean, Uganda is a great example. They're a great leader in Africa with regards to refugee inclusion. They're a great leader in the world with regards to refugee inclusion. In Uganda, refugees actually get a portion of land on which they can farm, and the Ugandan laws and policies allow them to live and work as citizens live and work. And that's one thing that we have also in Ghana, where our laws and our regulations allow refugees to live and work as Ghanaians, as myself, do. The problem is that the methods of integration are perhaps not the best. A lot of them are archaic, and a lot of them were designed for a smaller problem, but we see that the refugee problem is not decreasing. For instance, I wrote in an article that was published by the World Economic Forum that the refugee camp model is either dead or dying, because it was meant to act as an intermediate solution to refugee issues But you'll see that there are some refugee camps that are 3 decades old and much, much older.
Yeah,
and
like
so what
the
else can you do?
Dadaab in Kenya.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what solutions do you prefer? But just hold your thoughts there before we get into solutions. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation on the inclusion of Africa's marginalized people. You're watching NC Debrief. Welcome back to NC Debrief, and we're discussing the inclusion of Africa's marginalized people. And joining me to discuss this topic today is Kuewor in Accra, Ghana. And I also have with me in the studio Bola Lawal, co-founder of ScholarX. Nice to have you on the Debrief, Bola.
Thank you very much.
Bola, in what ways can education be used as a tool for empowering marginalized people?
Thanks again for having me. Education is a very important and powerful tool. You have to understand that, they say stuff about, you use education to really educate people and increase their awareness and accessibility to things that they may not be accustomed to. One of the things that marginalized group particularly, because if you think of why they are marginalized, or why, especially if you look at the crisis, they can't get access to go to school because they are afraid of their safety. So one of the things that you can use is if you can create an opportunity for them to access education in where they are, whether it's through digitally or village type systems. It's a very good way to help get people access to the type of education, not necessarily full formal education, but at least to be able to learn some skills to be able to help improve their immediate communities. Because you think about why they're marginalized people, there are a lot of resources, a lot of services they can't access. And through education, people can self-learn, whether it's with people within the community learn midwifery to help mothers that are trying to give birth, or to learn certain skills, even to become teachers, to be able to teach the kids in the area. So education really helps, even in a way helps people provide, teach themselves the ways to provide services they can't necessarily access because of the key reason why they are marginalized.
And a sort of empowerment.
Exactly.
But some will argue that these marginalized people are fleeing conflict and their immediate priorities, just survival, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter. So is education a luxury for marginalized people, or it should be part of...
So when you look at it from just the basic level and you think about, but I have to eat, but you have to also think about the sustainability of the food you have to eat. What will you be able to do to be able to ensure that you keep eating? So if you're not educated, or if you don't have some sort of skills, how would you be able to provide? So while it's, we have to think about it as an ecosystem. Well, you can say, food is more important, but how are you going to keep getting the food? Is it by only relying on humanitarian things that get donated? What's more sustainable? Or, as we are getting some donations and some food here, I'm also learning how to give certain services, or at least we can provide some things for ourselves, and that's more sustainable.
Then depending on donors and handouts to
it's not
survive.
sustainable.
Yeah.
And education is one of the things that can help them be self-sustenance.
Yeah. Now, let's bring in Ria from Accra, Ghana. Ria, why have the institutional arrangements and governing processes in many African countries been able to fully protect the fundamental rights of citizens, let alone the marginalized people?
I'm sorry, do you say why haven't they, or why have they?
Why haven't they been able to fully protect the fundamental rights of citizens, and let alone marginalized people?
Well, I think in the scheme of everything, the UNHCR, for instance, has a lot to deal with. It's very difficult to take a deep dive into integration solutions, for instance. And I've always said that a large portion of refugee integration does not really does not only focus on refugees themselves, but on members of their host community. And by and large, it's become very difficult for organizations like the UNHCR or the IOM to do this effectively because of their global mandate. And so it's much a better plan to go into the problem vis-a-vis live in a refugee camp and listen from the refugees themselves what they think will work for them. We've noticed in our work at Rio that a lot of the economic integration solutions that were brought about by groups like the UNHCR and other involved organizations were not taking off very well because it's very difficult to turn people who had other professions and other lives before they became refugees into farmers. It's very difficult to do these things, even when you throw money at it. And that's why our solutions, which I'll get into in a moment, take a much different approach than what is the mainstream normal.
And talking about those solutions, who is responsible for providing solutions, and what solutions do you recommend? What steps? Because you said it's beyond just throwing money at a problem.
Yes, I mean, it's the UNHCR and the governments involved are responsible for creating these solutions, but we recommend giving ownership and giving agency back to the people who are troubled, that's the refugees themselves. Because what you'll notice when you go into a refugee camp is that you'll meet people from all walks of life, people with PhDs and advanced degrees, people who are completely separate professions than what organizations are trying to now push on them in the name of refugee integration or in the name of migrant inclusion. So we started this UBI program, Unconditional Basic Income, where we're giving refugees $1.50 every day, and they get to save this money and do with what they please. And what we've noticed has started happening in the different refugee camps that we're working in is that microeconomies are popping up from within
those camps.
Yes. Sorry?
Within those camps, microeconomies are popping up.
Yes, exactly. Including the world's largest refugee camp, the Kakuma camp. And again, there's this notion that refugees are helpless people and cannot do for themselves what needs to be done. But in the Kakuma camp, for instance, our unconditional basic income program, which is crypto-based and is delivered via mobile money, is completely run by the refugees themselves. So my organization only acts as an overseeing body. Even though we implemented it, it's completely run by the refugees themselves. And we're hoping that this will also help change the narrative around refugee helplessness and the ways that integration and inclusion solutions are implemented.
Thank you, Ria. Now, Bola, in what ways, what programs does ScholarX have that's unique and different from the traditional model that governments can adopt in educating refugees and marginalized people?
Thank you very much. Again, thanks for having me. So one of the, and I was very excited to come talk about this because one of the unique products that we just launched, it's called Lenam in Pidgin, which means learning in English. Yeah. And the whole idea is to be able to teach people different skills, vocational, digital skills in localized dialects. So not saying that everyone in a camp or things like that are uneducated, but if you look at IDP camps in Nigeria, for example, one of the key things that have been disrupted is people's access to education skills. So what we wanted to do is first provide a safer environment for them to learn. So on a cheap mobile device, they can learn any skill. They can learn from how to fix mobile phones. Interesting, he was talking about microeconomics developing. So again,
so it's not just classroom education that ScholarX does. Yeah,
it's a lot of skills. So the Learn product gets people access to skills. Because if you think about it, camp, what are the services people will need there? Mm-hmm. So even getting them access to things they can learn, watch short videos from learning how to fix a mobile phone to learning different things in agriculture. So even while you're confined to a space in a camp or, some other terms that they use for the refugee situation, you are learning skills that can help you right away. And even you can even learn how to become a teacher. So if they need teacher in that environment, for example, you can learn different skills because we've even localized a lot of things. So even language is not that a barrier.
And I like what Ria said, that a lot of people have this notion that refugees are hopeless people. They were living and thriving in an environment before disaster struck. So not all of them have some skills they're coming with and interest.
And what you also want to do is to give them an opportunity to at least have some sort of normalcy or some sort of continuation. Okay, well, while I can't go and do X, I can at least learn some things on this device, and where we are, we can even continue to. I won't use the word thrive because it's very difficult to see that someone is thriving in that kind of environment.
But personal development skills and improving self, because life would not be in the refugee camps, or their conditions won't remain
exactly.
Like permanently.
And a lot of times too is some people go in there thinking it's just for a short while, and it ends up becoming
long term,
years and long term. So what we just wanted to do with Learn particularly is to get people. To meet people where they are is one of the things that we're saying. It's very even poignant when we are talking about refugee camps. Meet them where they are and help them or provide things in languages or connotations they already understand. And that's the whole idea. So you cheap devices on this cheap feature phone. It's a smart feature phone now because there's a technology called Kuewor that allows people to build apps on feature phone, so you can learn WhatsApp, you can learn use the Learn app to learn how to use different services, also learn vocational skills that can even help you. So we just want to be able to bring services to people where they are in what they understand.
Now, Ria, just before we go, do you think governments are doing enough? We do know that we're in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, there's donor fatigue. What lasting solutions would you suggest to deal with the issue of marginalized people in Africa? Or is it a reality we just have to deal with as long as conflicts exist? And, we're humans, conflicts have always existed since time immemorial. Are we always going to deal with marginalized people? And what lasting solutions do you prefer?
Absolutely, that's a great question. In short, I don't think governments are doing enough. I'll talk first about governments that belong to countries in which policies do not allow refugees to live and work as normal citizens do. I think keeping refugees or keeping people in camps is even economically a bad idea. Apart from the human dignity that it deprives of people, I think it's a bad idea economically, because what happens then is that these people become dependent on the state or whatever funding organizations are providing for their needs within the camp, however meager those needs are. If governments are able to recognize that a lot of these people coming into their countries have skills that they can contribute to the country and contributes to their host communities and thereby contributes to the larger economy of the countries, that would be more of a long-term solution for refugees and migrants. With regards to countries in which refugees and migrants are allowed to live and work, I think, again, and I'd like to reiterate that throwing money at the solution or giving refugees land and expecting that people who are chemists and teachers and other professions will all of a sudden become farmers is a bit of a lost idea, a bit of a dead end. I think unconditional basic income is the way to go. It's never largely been tested in refugee solutions. And Rio's doing that now in 3 refugee camps and 6 cities in India and 1 state. And we're moving to the Middle East soon. And just giving agency back to refugees and migrants and giving them money to do with what they will, giving them back the ability to take control of their lives and to take control of their local economy is the way to go for countries in which refugees are allowed to live and work.
Absolutely.
I think that's more long-term. That's more of a viable long-term solution than keeping them in camps and detention centers.
Now, in 30 seconds, Bola, your final thoughts.
I really, again, thanks for having me. I really believe that everyone should have access to anything they want to learn, and this does not exclude people that unfortunately find themselves in humanitarian situations like in camps, and I'll take the IDP camps in Nigeria, in the Northeast particularly. People really need to be able to get access, while they are in camps or while, unfortunately, there are disruptions to their daily lives. We need to be able to make them continue learning and continue figuring out their pathways to economic freedom. And I really truly believe that what we are doing, and in conjunction with governments, we can really help people get access to different skills and continue to improve themselves. Because the key thing is not just to make sure that they eat or they're okay or they're in camp, because they're not in prison, they're just in camp based on current situation.
The goal is to make them self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient,
to be able to provide for
exactly.
themselves.
So we want them to continue to improve and self-sufficient, and that way, their life course will continue to improve.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's been a wonderful conversation on the debrief. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you both for joining me to discuss this topic. I do appreciate your insights. And that's it on this week's debrief. The conversation continues offline. You can leave your comments and join in the conversation there. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. Until next time on NC Debrief. Bye-bye.